This is the resolution of the Nrm Parliamentary Caucus that sat today at State House in Entebbe. We, the members of the Nrm Parliamentary Caucus, assembled at State House Entebbe today, Friday, 2nd February 2024, conscious of the strategic subject of rationalization of government agencies and public expenditure. Having received, internalized, and exhaustively discussed the keynote address of His Excellency the President and the National Chairperson of the NRM, and having further received a presentation on rationalization of government agencies and public expenditure by the Minister of Public Service, hereby resolved as follows: to support rationalization of government agencies and public expenditure through the enactment of legislation in Parliament, sector by sector, signed Obua Dennis Amson, Government Chief Whip, Chairperson, NRM Parliamentary Caucus, dated 2nd February 2024, State House, Entebbe. Rationalization and public expenditure. And that is still one, and I think question number one and the second question, reasons for rationalization, is one and the same. First and foremost, there was only one subject matter. That is rationalization of government agencies and public expenditure. Meaning, when we rationalize, we shall save the public with some expenditure to a tune of over 1 trillion Uganda shillings, as mentioned in the presentation of the Minister of Public Service. The gist of rationalization is one, to avoid duplication of services, where you have the mainstream ministry with department, and there is again an independent or autonomous agency, authority, or commission doing more or less the same work being done by a ministry. And it is aiming at strengthening departments of ministries and make them more functional than now, as opposed to duplication, where a department does the same thing and an agency created under a ministry is doing the same work. In terms of timelines, this is immediate. You are all aware that when the bill was introduced in Parliament as an omnibus bill, there were reservations. As we speak, the reason why the resolution is talking about sector by sector, that implies the omnibus bill will be unpacked. And when it is unpacked, there are 38 bills in that omnibus bill. And the 38 bills will be clustered. As you know, the standard practice in Parliament is that the bigger chunk of parliamentary work is done in committees. Now, when we cluster the bills, for instance, you will have 6 bills clustered under the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. To mention the Non-Performing Assets Recovery Trust Act, which is meant to be repealed, the Assets of Departed Asians Act, which is meant to be amended, the National Population Council Act, which is meant to be repealed, the National Planning Authority Act, which is meant to be amended, the Public Enterprises Reform and Divestiture Act, which is meant to be amended, and the Tier 4 Microfinance Institutions Act, which is also due to be amended. So that forms the cluster under the Ministry of Finance. And since parliamentary businesses are done in committees, that means the cluster of 6, when read on the floor of Parliament for the first time, will be referred by the presiding officer to be handled by the Committee on Finance, Planning and Economic Development, which is the sector committee that oversees the Ministry of Finance. Another point under clustering is that you will have, for instance, under the Ministry of Education and Sports, there are also 4 bills clustered. One, the Higher Education Students Financing Act, which is meant to be amended, the National Library Act, which is meant to be amended, the National Curriculum Development Center Act, which is meant to be amended, the Uganda National Commission for UNESCO Act, which is also meant to be amended. Now, this is the cluster of bills under the Ministry of Education and Sports. When they are introduced for first reading in Parliament, the presiding officer will therefore refer these bills to the Sectoral Committee on Education and Sports. So that is what we agreed will be the due process of handling these bills. That is why we are saying sector by sector. I can give examples and examples. When you look at, for instance, internal affairs, there are 2 bills. That is the Registration of Persons Act, which is supposed to undergo amendment, the Non-Governmental Organizations Act, which is supposed to undergo amendment. When these 2 clusters are presented, the presiding officer will refer these 2 to the committee, the Sectoral Committee on Defense and Internal Affairs. This is how we have agreed to proceed. Now, on the money lenders, you have heard on the cluster under Ministry of Finance. What the ministry has done, the ministry has written back, requesting for more time. But as I speak, that particular bill was already part of the omnibus bill that was tabled, and there were reservations. So meaning that bill on Tier 4 on money lending, as I speak, is ready. Now, with the decision we have taken today, that means we need to again go back to Cabinet, for Cabinet to ratify. Then later on, we shall have all these bills gazetted. That is the process, because when we unpack, we must go through the due process. And then they will be tabled in Parliament. So in terms of timeline, it is immediate. In terms of our commitment to our resolutions, we are committed. You have heard the Tier 4 is part of this bill. In fact, the reason Finance gave is that Tier 4 was already part of rationalization. And as such, it would be important that we move together with other bills in terms of amendment and or repeal.